from our IT specialist down there at the end. And so we will begin our work session of January the 29th in preparation for our February the 2nd regular meeting. So in calling this meeting to order, our first item that we're going to take up is Mr. Doherty is going to give us a presentation on a proposed reorganization for his park and recreation department, excuse me. And so Brandon, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Joel, are you running the machine for me?
I am. Allegedly.
I think we need to go to the top as opposed to start at the bottom.
Well, we're frozen up here.
Okay. Do you have a hard copy at all, Brandon?
I don't.
I think we're back in business.
Are you?
now.
Okay.
Just-
All righty.
Just a brief.
Use your air.
That's right. It's one of those days. It looks like it's continuing too.
Well, now you know the topic anyway.
Looks like we're all frozen up. Yeah, sorry about that. Just stand by for
Okay.
one moment.
Let me see if I can print off a copy. How about that?
Sure, I can probably talk to a few things too.
Are you unfrozen now, Joel?
Not quite yet. I can't start the presentation for some reason.
All right.
Is the slide too visible? If you just click in.
Yep.
There we go.
Well, there you go.
If you just click through that way, it'll be fun. Hello, ma'am. So, Parks and Recreation, when I originally got here, I took a look at the organization as a whole, and one of the pieces that we took a look at was the manpower. And dealing with the manpower, I started to reference job descriptions and the manning document to determine what we were doing and how we were doing business. What I found is that the manning document and job descriptions and what people were really doing in the organization wasn't very consistent. The job description had them doing one thing, roles and responsibilities were a little different, so I wasn't really quite sure what we were doing. So Nav and I at that point started to work through to find out, how is it supposed to be at that moment? And we got it all on paper and we kind of created it. Also, as we did that, we had in mind the programmings that have been done in the past, what safety issues we might be doing, and a little bit of a cause and effect. So if you hit the next slide.
I'll try, guys, but it's not behaving. I hate to do a restart because then we'll lose the connectivity of the meeting.
Okay. Again, let me. I'll tell you what. I'm going to excuse myself and see if I can do a printout real quick. Okay. And you can talk through it if you want to,
You go to the
Brandon.
email and just open.
Get this going again. There we go. All right.
All right. So after we got done putting all that information together, roles and responsibilities and the things that we were doing, we created, and I sat down and spoke to every individual employee to talk to them specifically, who are you reporting to, what are your jobs doing, and compared that to what the written documentation was. This chart is kind of an illustration of what was provided to us. Now, it is similar to what was in the master plan, but it wasn't necessarily similar to the way we were operating. This is really similar to how we operated. This chart here is very condensed. As you can see, there's only really 3 positions of leadership, and the one on the left has a lot of responsibilities, where the one on the right didn't have as many responsibilities. That created a very small, siloed organization. And as you know, one of the biggest things that we struggle with is communication, roles, responsibility, and safety, and getting projects completed. I think that this demonstrates why we have some of those challenges, because we don't really have the accountability out for people. Next slide. So Nav and I sat down and we started to consider all the factors that went into how do we develop a staffing document that is going to give us what we need in 5 to 10 years. So we took in all the cornerstone operations, all the tournaments, special events that we'll do out there, the turf field that's going to eventually go in, We're going to talk about increased customer service and engagement, increased programming. We wanted to reduce our contractual expenses by being able to do things in-house. We want to mitigate those expenses. We also want to be able to maintain things better, so we're not spending additional dollars down the road. We absolutely need to increase the programming. So looking at the things we're doing now, we can almost triple our programming. And then the other part is safety, is that we don't have enough people kind of right now to really get out there and make sure all our things are safe. So how does that look with support with staffing levels of succession planning and things like that? So that's the things that we took a look at. Next slide.
It looks like we're frozen again, guys. And I apologize. Let's see.
Number 4. Okay, yeah, that's good. So what we got at the end was 100% of the employees, based on the model that we're proposing, is going to be retained. Every employee, nobody was pushed out. All the employees will see same pay rate with no decrease in that. We do have a couple positions that might see potential based on roles and responsibilities. And then we have all the new positions that were proposed with the Cornerstone project, along with updating descriptions and titles for the organization so that we know that people are doing their job. That helps me manage them, hold them accountable, but it also gives us focus in areas to get things done. Next slide, please. And steak.
Let's try this.
All right, so you can tell that this one, we're very, very horizontal. What the goal was is to give people more focus in areas of responsibility to do a better job, so that way we can do our job better. So we don't really truly have a marketing or a budgeting person, but you can see the executive administrator. They would be also budgeting, marketing manager. We do not have a director of maintenance. We have a maintenance manager. It does all facility and vertical construction. We have community recreation, facility manager, grounds manager, and our eyes is the same as the turf manager for the Cornerstone operation, along with an athletic manager. And under them, we have broken out parks and athletic fields. So that way we can have the parks focused on, and we can have all the athletic fields focused on by individuals. You can see the dotted lines are shared assets. So we want to try to make sure we have the diversity to move people around with our part-time and seasonal folks, but we also want to have the ability to have a succession plan. So we want people to be able to move up through the organization and grow them. And this will give us that opportunity by having the different layers. And so that is what we're proposing. Next slide. We're proposing to do it kind of as a integration over time. We're not going to be able to just go out and hire a ton of people. But right now, we do have a marketing position approved. We would look to get the next 3 positions approved for us to go out and recruit. And then in FY 21-22, we would fill the remainder of those positions. So obviously, the big question is budgets. What's the budget? So we can get the next slide. So right now, the budget demonstrates that we have in the general fund, that's what we're looking at, but with the 1% and increase in budgets, we would go from 834 to 1.1, and then over the next year, we would go to 1.2. Now, those are projected based on hiring dates, and those are mostly full-time and the part-time people. Seasonal and part-time are really hard to calculate because those hours can increase or decrease, but we went to the max side of it, so we don't expect it to exceed that. So, and that is kind of what we're proposing. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, and so I'd like to answer any questions I can.
Okay, Alderman Carver, I know unless you are watching online, which I'm assuming you are not, that you are phone only, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll make sure that this gets, once it's corrected, we will make sure it gets into your packet so that you'll have it. But do you have any questions based on what you heard?
I do not.
Okay, all right. Alderman Sistrunk?
I do, and there are comments as much as questions.
Okay.
And areas of concerns as we grow, particularly as Cornerstone comes online. From all the research that we had done as we were looking at how Cornerstone would fit in with everything else, I'm still not convinced that we won't need another athletic person at Cornerstone, athletic marketer, tournament manager, whatever person at Cornerstone. So I just want to put that out there, that I think that we may have need for another position there. I think that we have the wherewithal to feather that in and get that slotted in. So that's a comment. I wanted to ask the grounds manager, the two groups that fall under him. One becomes sort of recs and typical park landscaping, and the other becomes field
Yes.
management.
So could you go back to the proposed doc, or org chart, please? So the Parks Department really doesn't have anybody who specializes in park operations. That park department, so on the left-hand side, the park supervisor, they would have 3 maintenance workers that would be working for them to maintain the parks full-time. That's all the grass cutting, that's pavilions, that's bathrooms, that's splash pads, that's dog parks. They're gonna make sure that the trash is picked up. Those resources are very similar to the athletic grounds resources. They're gonna be responsible primarily all for the athletic fields. And the reason they're separate is because the athletic fields during the peak seasons are so busy with maintenance. Yep. And now with the artificial turf fields and the things that we're gonna be doing with the new football field and the new the baseball fields, we're gonna need to be able to have 3 full-time people under that. But the nice thing is that we're not always 100% busy, so we're gonna share those resources. So if we know we have something going on, we can divert some of those employees. We wanna make sure the parks are maintained to a higher standard than we're currently doing. We wanna be proud of them, they wanna be safe, and they need to be clean. And this will give us an opportunity to take the parks to the next level, while still maintaining great operations of the fields.
Okay. And can we move to the money slide?
I hope so.
And just as a refresher for those of you who knew this at one time, but it's maybe not been in front of brain lately, when we did our local and private bill for the parks, we made sure that that language allowed us to use that money for construction, and so it will be used for debt service for Cornerstone and for operations. And when we structured our bonds to determine how much we could afford to borrow for construction, we held back some funds, knowing that we would need to use those for operations. Now, what Brandon has done here, and I've looked at this, and you know, you can look at it several different ways. He's kept our general fund dollars flat. In reality, we would typically bump that up a little bit every year, just with the normal increases in budgets. And that would relieve a little of the pressure on the 1% monies. But the way that he's shown it there is manageable. It's manageable. So.
While we're on the money side, how are we tracking with the COVID on the 1%? Are we about where we had expected or more, or do we know?
Shockingly, it's about, it's more than I expected. It's a little less maybe than it had been, but more than I expected. We did not take as big a step back. I think that while sit-down restaurants have struggled, we've more than made up for it in the drive-through takeout areas.
We had a 6% drop, or actually it was closer to 7% drop, I guess, in the food and beverage.
Which was, and I had thought it was going to be more than 20 to 30%.
Hotel's been more significant. The hotels
Hotels have been
but it's a lesser part of
It's
the
a very
tax,
much
right?
smaller part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Anything else, Alderman Sistrunk, from Mr. Doherty?
No, thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Alderman Little?
Well, I was noticing, you went from like 3 direct reports to about 7 on that flow chart. You gonna be able to handle, I guess, that many direct reports?
Yeah, so the industry standard would be 6 to 1. If we can go back to the org chart, please. So 6 to 1, right now, the structure that we currently have is basically very similar to how we're operating right here, is how I'm kind of operating it right now. So The idea is that we need to give those people who are managers and supervisors responsibility and hold them accountable to do the job. And if we're saying that there's an expectation on a layer to do it, then they need to be out there doing it. If it's tighter, where I have to be more deep engaged in those different departments, I'm gonna struggle to really create that standard and the level that we wanna get to. This allows me to be able to step back, have a bigger view, but also give them the opportunity to take that ownership. So it really is on our methodology moving forward.
And is that where the 5 people anticipated maybe raises would go to those
Yeah,
taking
so-
on management or supervisory roles?
Yeah, there's a couple positions where they're getting increased responsibilities and more supervisory responsibilities. So based on roles and responsibilities, NAB was working through that piece of this.
And Alderman Walker is not here. Let me cycle through. Alderman Beatty?
Not specific to this, I might ask Mr. Doherty to talk a little bit, well, if we have time, about Moncrief Park a little bit. I guess we can do so at some point in time, but I want to go back and revisit Moncrief Park and the overall scope of what we plans and things we want to do there, and how that some of this bond money would be incorporated into that. And I mean, when I was elected, I got on board, kind of got on the tail end of some of this stuff, and I'd like to, since we have a new director and he's got really, really good ideas and sees this stuff from, you know, our broad perspective and everything, I'd like to do that and have the board kind of brought into that, to what we want to do with Moncrief Park.
Okay, well.
Isn't that part of what we just did with Down Thomas?
Well,
Yeah. Time out. Let's cycle through this, and then we'll come back to that. Is that all right?
sure.
Okay. So nothing else from this presentation, or reorg. Okay. Alderman Vaughn.
Mayor, I don't have nothing, but thank you. Thank you, because I'm seeing some of the things that Al and 15 interview him and I had when he first came, his presentation when he first came. Now some of the things that he talked about, I'm looking at them now, so thank you very much, Doctor.
Okay, good deal. The only question I have is somebody who always looks to who's the second in command.
Yes, ma'am.
That's not depicted there. You got a nice long line, and you got nothing that.
I'll draw a couple dotted lines.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, Alderman Sistrunk, you had one other thing?
I had dibs over Alderman Beatty.
So noted. I went back to you. We'll go back to Alderman Beatty in a moment.
And I could see, again, back to that cornerstone and the demands that particular park is going to take. I could see that becoming that second in command that you're concerned about long term. So.
And I think with the Cornerstone operation, as you had alluded to, with manning and staffing, I think we're able to maintain, but we'll definitely need to go back and revisit that to ensure that we're sustaining that operation. But I think with this, we have the ability to, for that first year, be able to get ourselves to a point where we can reevaluate after it's ran for a while.
Right.
Okay, all right. Alderman Carver, I'm going to come to you in a moment, Alderman Beatty. Alderman Carver?
Let's do this. I'm going to ask this presentation to be presented Tuesday night in the regular board meeting. In a public forum. Thank you. If we could just get it added to the agenda or something, I want to see this in a public setting when I can be there, please.
Okay, well, it's on the agenda as the reorg, so we'll make sure we don't put that on consent, and it can come up at that point in time.
Let's do that. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Okay, anything else?
And this is a public forum, right?
Yes, it's definitely a public forum, I understand. Okay. So Mr. Doherty will be ready to, hopefully, Mr. Clements won't have quite the problems that we had today in that. And we'll make sure that this also gets into packets and e-packet. And Alderman Beatty, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
No, I know there've been some plans and some construction and some things planned for Moncrief Park. Moncrief Park is a city park. It's in the north central part. It's in my ward, and so J.L. King is in parks in the north part of town, but Moncrief's in my ward. So I mean, I kind of have, it's kind of something I take, you know, it's part of something I feel like I'm responsible for. But you know, it's our city swimming pool, public swimming pools in Moncrief Park. Our right now the only dog park in town is in Moncrief Park. There's some other, there's property, and Mr. Doherty and I have talked about it with other options to accommodate people and young people in non-traditional sports like the skate park thing that can be done there that won't necessarily be able to be done at one of our other parks. So I guess, and I know that we had some plans for building maybe a public bathroom facility or something there, but I'd like to see us go back and look and incorporate, you know, restroom facilities and capital expenditures in Moncrief Park being done in the pool house. I toured the pool house today. There's no roof on the men's and women's locker room at the swimming pool. It's wide open. And I mean, that might have been acceptable in 1950, but it's not in 2021. And I can't see anything appreciable that's been done to that swimming pool or its facility, the facilities associated with it in years, other than just, I think the inside of the pool had a vinyl liner put in or something like that at some point in time. But if we're committed to having a public swimming pool, and I'm very committed to that, facility and running it and staffing it and doing it properly, we need to spend some money, I think, on you know, as we can, not big money, but money to rehab and refurbish the pool and the facility, the locker room facilities and things, and maybe reorganize how we staff it and things like that at the swimming pool. And maybe some of that money we have a bathroom up there on that pavilion on top of the hill at Moncrief. I don't know why we need another restroom building or something like that. So what I'm saying is, if that money can be incorporated into something that improves the bathhouse and the locker room facilities and stuff for the Moncrief Park pool and stuff, I want to see us maybe go back in and relook at that. And some other changes. I know there's a group that wants to put in a skate park. I think that's a great thing. My son, when he was in high school, that's what he loved, that kind of stuff. So, and there's probably a lot of young people out there that like the non-traditional sports, you know, baseball. They like that kind of stuff. So this gives us a place for young people and for people to recreate in a way that's not baseball or football or basketball or something, which is weird. That's where that draws our big numbers of people, and that's where we spend most of our money. At the same time, to have a comprehensive recreation program and facilities in our city, one of our parks needs to have this stuff, and it needs to be as nice as we possibly can make it, Mayor.
Okay, all right. Well, we certainly, I think all believe that a pool is a good thing. It's an appropriate thing. Unfortunately, there's a single pot of money from which we are drawing right now that is dedicated for, right now, Cornerstone, the Sportsplex, and McKee Park as a part of that bonding effort. I don't know what we had dedicated for Moncrief. We'd have to go back and look at that master plan and see.
Some kind of building or restroom, something out there.
And we can go back and look at those things that are engaged originally for Moncrief and the plans for Moncrief and see where we can fall in on that. Alderman Sistrunk?
And I would say that Alderman Beatty's right. We do need to be taking a look at all our parks, not just Cornerstone, McKee, and the Sportsplex, although those were the focus of the bond issue. But while we're looking at those things, Needmore is a park that needs a good bit of attention to. There's a building there that's used, that's in need of some
bulldozer.
Yeah, that's exactly what it needs, and we need to put back something that's more appropriate for this time. But those are the kind of things that are bigger capital expenditures that have to be looked at and funding streams found and work into our overall capital plan. And I think Mr. Doherty will do that. It's just that right now, plate's full with the bond issue.
Let me mention this. I mean, I don't know, but I'd heard, and I don't know, it's a conversation with somebody that swimming is down and participation is down, and we cut out Sunday swimming because, you know, we weren't having any participation stuff. It's kind of like at the state level. Our previous state government people cut the budgets in our state government. They said until there was a shortfall in revenue for our state general fund, and parks had to be cut. And so they said, oh man, we don't have money to operate this budget. The whole idea to begin with was to cut the size of state government. That was a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you cut out the revenue sources, you'll eventually have to lower the size of your state government. If that was the end game, that's what happened. What happens with this is if we don't take care of facilities at Moncrief Park, the pool and stuff, and it gets bad, the self-fulfilling prophecy is, or whatever you think is going to happen happens. People don't come because it's not in good shape. And if it's not, you know, so then your number of swimmers go down and your participation goes down. And I don't get to the point where we come back to the table and say, gosh, there's nobody swimming, let's close the swimming pool, because we've let it go down to the point where people don't use it because it's in bad shape. So I want us to spend some money. We want to go out there and spend gajillions of dollars on the swimming pool, but stuff that where it's nice and it's, people want to come to it and it's functional and that kind of thing. And that's what I'm looking to do.
Well, I don't think there's any lack of interest in swimming, because when we cut it out this past summer due to the pandemic, we were absolutely hearing from people who wanted to be there. And swimming is a big deal, particularly in the South and Mississippi in the summer. And so, no, I think that we'll always want to offer that. And that was one of the things that Mr. Doherty has sat down, but I'm going to make him come back up again, because there are other programming opportunities that I want us to have. And in particular, Alderman Vaughn is interested in track. And I think we have worked with, did you meet with Mr. Owens?
I did.
Okay. Working with we have tracks in town that we can do some sort of joint opportunity with the school, just like we've done for other things. And that was part of that effort. If we can join with another entity that's already got that facility and we can make that work for us, then I think that's an ideal way to go. Unfortunately, we're the only ones with a pool, except the university, and theirs is geared towards something else. But no, I think a pool is absolutely appropriate. Unfortunately, my understanding of costs associated with pools is there's no such thing as a small expense. If you want to do something to that pool, it's going to take a whole lot of investment. I think there's certainly some small things we can do to make it look better.
Well, I think roofs on the dressing rooms and stuff like that would be appropriate. They wouldn't be big
I
money.
don't know, it worked for me.
You know.
And that tells you how old, no, that tells you how old it is.
Locker room, men's and women's will look up and be the best guy, you know.
Well, there was, and I remember it
Back,
well.
in the day, maybe, but
Well,
they weren't flying all these little things around.
Sad but
like they
true,
do
back
now.
in the day, that's
Right.
exactly right. But the reality is, when I swam in that pool, which I did, that locker room and that whole bit, I went back there for the dog paddle thing. You know, they do the end of the season dog thing, and it smells exactly like it did back in 1950, whatever. So, but you're absolutely right. I think we're going to increase our programming. What other programming opportunities are you looking at, Mr. Doherty?
We're looking at, so we're doing 5 and 6 year old baseball, softball. We're going to do 5 and 6 lacrosse. We got this whole kind of gambit of stuff that we're going to be doing with 5 and 6 year olds. From 5 to 13, 14, we're going to be every 2 months, we're going to have youth activities throughout the entire year. So right now we're gearing into baseball, softball. Then we got flag football. We're going to do a version of soccer potentially. And we're going to be continually around doing that. But then on top of that, we're also going to be doing a lot more tournaments. So we're going to be adult tournaments, rec tournaments, and then we haven't even really dipped into the fitness programming within our facility and our places that we're going to have. So now that we have green space and football fields and some of this aquatic maybe potentially, we're going to be able to program directly to fitness for all ages. And so we have a lot that we're looking to do. So.
Okay. And I know that we talked about putting another goalpost up at the J.L. King other end of the football field.
Yep, so we have some plans at J.L. King. We've been developing some plans over at Posey. We got some things that we'd like to do to Patriot. We've talked about Moncrief. George Williams has got some things that we'd like to do to upgrade that a bit. Everything from
George Evans.
George Evans.
Yep.
Servicing.
You get the hang on it.
I know, the names are all
It's okay, it's all right. Well, one of the things, if you don't mind, is put a list together of the programs that you're looking at bringing forward, and at each one of the parks where those activities are gonna potentially take place, and that will give the board an opportunity to see what you're looking at from a programming standpoint.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yes, Alderman Vaughn.
Alderman want to say something, and Ham Bay, they made a good suggestion about that we do need to look at all parks, because a lot of times once Cornerstone get through, the old people get tired of that park. We do want to have some with decentness for them to go in all our other parks that they up to standard. And then that's why we really need to look at all of them, keep them all up to standard, because you get tired of being in one spot all the time. You might not play for the next 2 hours, and then you're going to want somewhere else to go instead of going to the motel somewhere else. And so if we keep all our parks up to standard, and I think it'll really benefit us when they start having big tournaments here.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the reason we did the master plan, is to be able to see where we needed to do that and how we can plan our way through the budgeting process and all of that. So, yes. Anything other?
And I would like to say, I think, and this is for Alderman Beatty, I think both of us have a lot of things that we want to see done, and it's hard for us to be patient as those things happen. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a good bit of planning. And we're making progress, and we shouldn't lose sight of the progress we are making.
I would suggest that any alderman that wants to Mr. Doherty could meet them and take them on a tour of the pool and facilities to be an eye-opener to what condition our swimming pool is in, and the bathhouse and the facilities over there, just to get a baseline of what we're, and it's not gonna take big bucks, but we need to spend some money, and it doesn't need to be long-term or intermediate term. We need to do this stuff, if we can find it, we need to spend some money in that facility by itself right now. And so to have it where it's decent for people and will attract some family, I mean, their families that don't belong to country clubs and private pools and things like that, that's their option in City of Starkville, swim. And that thing ought to be as nice as we possibly can make it and keep it, within our ability to do so financially. And I just think that those are immediate needs. So the pool's an immediate need. And but anyway, I mean, it wouldn't hurt when you get time, go look at it. And so just Mr. Darden carry you through that thing, and it's an eye-opener. It really is. We need to spend some money on the pool.
Okay.
Mayor, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you, Mr. Doherty. Appreciate it. All right, we can move to our agenda items themselves. And first item, as usual, is going to be the minutes. And Mr. Latimer, have you got anything about those minutes that we need to be thinking about? Have you already?
I have reviewed them and they are ready to go.
Okay. Any issues with putting those on consent with everyone? Okay. I don't, at this point in time, have necessarily any comments I intend to make. So if anyone's got some they want on the agenda for highlighting, just let us know and we'll put them on there. We have no public appearances. We have public hearing that is amending the Code of Ordinances that we brought forward from the last time, and this one is another hearing to look at the public brew pub exceptions to food sale requirements and to define brew pubs. Mr. Latimer, do you want to give a little heads up on that one since you got kind of deep in the weeds on that?
Yes, ma'am, I'd be happy to. So remember, guys, that this change is not compelled by law. So this is a total public policy decision by the board. You guys can do this or not do this at your will and pleasure. Of course, this is a change that's been requested by the Cigar Lounge to allow them to sell craft beer and not be beholden to the 25% food sale rule, that food sales be 25% of their gross revenue. So what fell to me is what's the cleanest and simplest way to do this and best way to do this legally. Our first approach, as you guys know from the public hearing 2 weeks ago, was to carve out a specific exception for brew pubs from the 25% food sales rule if they are sitting in the leisure and recreation district. After that hearing, we continued to comb the Starkville Code of Ordinances, and Daniel Haviland looked at the UDC and found out that the UDC references brew pubs a couple of times in there, and that if we made this exception for brew pubs, we would have to then amend the UDC. And I know Daniel's working on kind of a holistic amendment to the UDC to bring forward everything at the same time. And so then I thought, well, rather than single out things exception by exception and perhaps miss an exception that might apply, just restate the rule. So more than one way to skin a cat, come at it 180 degrees from the different direction. And so what this proposed draft does is just simply states the law. It states the Mississippi statutory structure for alcoholic beverages, and it states, so it adds the definition of alcoholic beverages to make sure alcoholic beverages are distinguished from beer and light wine, and then it applies the 25% food sales rule to on-premises retailer sellers of alcoholic beverages, just like it does in state code, which means that brew pubs would be exempted as a matter of law, as would small craft breweries or anything else that was not under that section of the statute. Then the only other thing it does from a third standpoint is it just makes mention of Starkville's leisure and recreation district from a Go Cup standpoint, because you guys in 2018 had amended the alcohol ordinance to allow Go Cups for any special event or festival, especially expressly approved by the board, but it didn't mention anything about the 2020 amendment of the leisure and recreation district. So I added that in there to make sure there's no ambiguity between Section 1041 and the Leisure and Recreation District Ordinance 2020-04. So the mayor and I were talking, and since this is a different approach, we think that it's best that it trigger an additional public hearing. So this would be the first public hearing on this particular draft. We would get a chance to read it, cogitate over it, talk about it Tuesday night, draw on y'all's collective wisdom about how, are we effectuating what needs to be done, and then we could put one more final draft before you at the next meeting for consideration.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. All right. Any questions, Mr. Alderman Carver, any questions?
I don't, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Sistrunk?
This will be a fuller discussion, I'm sure, Tuesday night, but within the last week, I've had someone ask me about the possibility of opening a smoking lounge with hookahs outside the leisure and entertainment district. And these things seem to be traveling in tandem. And once we start making exceptions outside the leisure and entertainment district, it feels like this is going to spin out of what our original intention was. And so I just want to put that concern on the table and note that while we're talking about brew pubs today, I feel like we will be talking about smoking lounges next. And so the question is, do we maintain the area, the leisure and entertainment area where we want to grant these exceptions, or do we want to let this be citywide?
Okay. All right. Alderman Little, anything? Okay. Alderman Beatty?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Vaughn?
No, Mayor, thank you,
All
just
right.
thinking.
Okay, all right, well, something to think about, and it's a public hearing, so nothing that will be reflective of consent. The next item
Ma'am.
Carver, Alderman
yes,
Carver.
I'm sorry, Alderman Carver, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Alderman Sistrunk probably fielded some of the same questions. I'm getting those exact same questions within the district, and also starting to field questions about, brown bag special, bringing liquor and wine into, especially liquor. Could that be done? So City Attorney, I'll call you with a couple I'd written. I'm sorry I didn't get by me yesterday, but a couple business owners are thinking about this same type situation. I would just call you right after the meeting.
I'll be happy to field that call, and I'll just remind you guys one other thing, and that is at least one community in Mississippi was not inclined to let the cigar lounge sell craft beer, and that's Oxford. They said, no, you can come in as a smoking lounge, but you can't sell beer. I'm going to go to the Tupelo store today and check that out and see if they're selling beer and exactly how they're doing that. So again, it's discretionary on your part, and if you think it opens a can of worms, you can factor that in.
I think, I went on the website and pulled up the Tupelo store, and I saw that they had a cooler that it looked like it might have beer in it, but it wasn't like a brewery. They didn't have a picture of a brewery in there, so.
No, it's not too.
Have you been to there, Alderman Vaughn?
No,
Okay.
it's not, it's just a cool one.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So it is different in that sense.
Unless they done changed since since we visited it.
Yeah.
Since I visited it.
Probably not, that would be a pretty big change.
I don't think they can brown bag unless you serve food either.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's not an option.
Counselor, did Oxford give you, or did you talk to anybody that gave you a reason for why they did not allow that?
I did. I talked to their city attorney, and what he told me was that they had the same 25% rule that we have currently on the books, which not only applies to on-premises retail sellers of alcoholic beverages, but also beer and light wine sellers.
Right.
They just wanted to group those items together. The idea being that they thought the state legislature, when it enacted the 25% food rule, the intent behind that rule was to not have just straight up honky tonks, in his words. The intent behind that rule was to have a place where you could go eat. And that's why they wanted to keep it across the board. They weren't willing to relinquish that. Because they thought, especially in Oxford, that it would open the door to just straight up liquor joints without food.
Gotcha.
I like honky tonks. Spent a lot of time in honky tonks back in Texas. All right, we will move on to the next public hearing, and both of these are for the same address. Mr. Haviland, anything in particular about these that we need to know?
It's just a conversion of an existing structure into an accessory dwelling unit, or what would qualify as accessory dwelling unit. And to do that, it requires a special exception in the variance. So.
Okay, all right, so, and both of those will be public hearings followed by the consideration, so, okay. The next item is our basically pro forma extending the proclamation for another 30 days. So consent on that? Thank you. Airport, Mr. Latimer, anything about this leasing tillable land? Have you got the lease?
No, I'll tell you where we are procedurally on that. So the lease that is in current effect expired, and the person did not renew it in time.
Okay.
They want to renew, but they need to advertise to make sure they follow the procurement laws.
Okay, all
So this is
right.
just an advertisement for the next lease.
Okay, all right.
Good sound.
But that lease is still, be the same lease virtually? It's just,
If it comes
If it
back,
comes
but
back,
there will be
okay.
no lease attached in the,
right.
in the
No, I
agenda, it's just an
understand that, but
advertisement.
when it comes back?
Yes,
you would-
ma'am.
Okay, all
Yes,
right,
ma'am.
so consent for that one. Under the fire department, we have the Ford fire truck, which is, we're gonna declare those as surplus and auction them off, so we'll take care of that one. Chief, anything, Chief, there you are, anything about that you wanna share? Okay, just a straight surplus, so consent on that?
Yes, ma'am.
All
My
right.
son wants me to buy, my grandson wants me to buy that so we can have something right around him.
Yeah, I think we
My
should do
3-year-old
that,
grandson,
yeah.
he's really into the fire truck.
That won't be inexpensive. Okay, and then we have hirings for Mr. Ashford is brought forward. The airport department needs linemen. Then we have the promotion of Mr. Britt to the rank of sergeant in the fire department. We have the authorization to hire an entry-level firefighter and a maintenance worker for Parks and Rec. We have part-time receptionist and intern for the City of Starkville Finance Administration, and the reorg of the Park and Recreation, and that is sitting under Mr. Ashford. So Mr. Doherty and Mr. Ashford can coordinate to bring that presentation forward at that point in time. So that one will not be on consent. Are we good with the other four, or I'm sorry, the other five being on consent? All righty. Under IT, we have the renewal of the service agreement with Next Step Innovations. What is Next Step, remind me?
It's just a specialty service provider, so they have special expertise in certain network equipment. So occasionally we need to take a deeper dive, and we call them in to help us out.
Okay, and this is service agreement, it's the same one, you're familiar with it, Mr. Latimer?
I've reviewed it, and we've amended it, and they've agreed to those revisions.
Okay, all right, consent on that one?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. Under police, we have a grant agreement for a hotspot justice assistance grant for funding overtime and equipment. And then a 4-county grant in the amount of $8,400 for body armor. Any issues with that one? Consent for those? Okay, thank you. And then sanitation, this is purchasing the rear loading refuse truck to replace the one that was like 2006. So I'd say we've about worn out our truck. So consent on that one?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. And utilities is the lowest quote for central supply for water line replacement along North Montgomery. So anything about that one? All right. That takes us through the open portion of the agenda, and we do have one executive session personnel item, which should be, that information is in the packet.
What
please.
department, sir?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I
The
believe
utility.
everybody has their package this year.
Yeah, and that's in utilities, so. Okay, if there's nothing else, anybody have anything else? All right, thank you, everyone. We will call it a day. Look forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday, and have a great weekend.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.